The sun was setting over Seoul when the sky changed forever. Hyun-woo was walking home from his job at the embassy when the first shadow fell across the street. He looked up and saw something that made his heart stop. A massive golden ship hung in the air above the city like a mountain floating in the sky. The ship was bigger than anything humans had ever built. It stretched 20 kilometers from front to back and cast a shadow that covered half of Seoul. The golden metal shimmered in the evening light and seemed to bend the air around it. Hyun-woo stood frozen on the sidewalk, watching the impossible sight. Above him, all around the city, people stopped what they were doing and stared up at the sky. Cars pulled over to the side of the road. Shopkeepers came out of their stores. Children pointed and asked their parents what was happening. But the adults had no answers either. Nobody had ever seen anything like this before. The golden ship just hung there in complete silence. It did not make any sound at all, no engines roaring, no metal creaking, nothing at all. It was as if the laws of physics had just decided to take a break. The ship defied everything humans knew about how things should work at the Seoul Space Center. Dr. Yoonji was working late in her laboratory when all the alarms started going off. She ran to the observation deck and saw the golden ship floating above the city. Her hands shook as she grabbed her equipment and started taking readings. The instruments went crazy trying to make sense of what they were seeing. The ship seemed to bend space itself around its hull. Energy readings showed impossible numbers that should not exist. The metal was unlike anything in the periodic table. It was as if someone had taken the rules of science and thrown them out the window. Captain Min-ho was at the military base when the emergency calls started coming and reports flooded in from around the world. Similar ships had appeared over every major city on Earth. New York, London, Tokyo, Moscow, Paris, Delhi. Each city now had a golden mountain hanging in its sky. The ships were identical in every way. Each one was exactly 20 kilometers long and shaped like a giant arrowhead pointing down at the cities below. They all hung at exactly the same height and cast the same massive shadows. The coordination was perfect and terrifying. Min-ho called his commanders and tried to figure out what to do. The military had plans for many things, but not for this. How do you fight something that can ignore gravity? How do you defend against technology that makes your best weapons look like stone? Tool's President Tae-young was in an emergency meeting when the reports came in. His advisors were panicking, but he forced himself to stay calm. The whole world was watching and humanity needed steady leadership. He ordered all military forces to go on high alert, but told them not to attack unless attacked first. The first day passed in tense silence. The ships did nothing but hover. They did not respond to any radio signals or attempts at communication. They just waited like giant predators watching their prey. The whole world held its breath, wondering what would happen next. Dr. Eungi worked through the night trying to understand the alien technology. She had been studying space and alien life for 20 years, but this was beyond anything she had imagined. The ships used energy in ways that should be impossible. They seemed to create their own gravity fields and bend light around them. The second day brought more questions but no answers. The ships remained perfectly still above the cities. Military satellites could not get clear readings on them. The aliens seemed to have some kind of shield that made detailed scanning impossible. All humanity could do was watch and wait. People began to react in different ways. Some panicked and tried to leave the cities. Others gathered in religious buildings to pray. A few brave souls stood on rooftops and tried to signal the ships with lights and mirrors, but the golden vessels gave no response at all. Young reporter Ji-won was one of the few people still working normally. She walked through the streets of Seoul interviewing people and trying to understand how this would change everything. The alien ships had turned the whole world upside down in just 2 days. The third day, something small but important happened. A child in Seoul pointed up at the ship and said it looked like a big golden fish. The comments spread on social media, and soon people around the world were calling them the golden fish. People started to feel less afraid when they gave the ships a silly name. Dr. Yoonji made an important discovery on the third day. She found that the ships were scanning the cities below them. The scans were very detailed and seemed to be cataloging everything from buildings to people to resources. It was as if someone was taking inventory of the whole planet. Captain Min-ho coordinated with military leaders around the world. Everyone agreed that the ships were too advanced to fight with normal weapons. But they also agreed that humanity would not give up without a fight. If the aliens wanted Earth, they would have to take it by force. The waiting was the hardest part. Nobody knew what the aliens wanted or why they were here. The ships just hung there like a sword over humanity's head. Everyone knew that something was coming, but nobody knew what it would be. On the fourth day, everything changed. The ships finally broke their silence. At exactly noon in every time zone around the world, a holographic image appeared in the sky above every major city. The image showed a tall alien being with skin that looked like crystal and eyes that glowed with inner light. The alien was beautiful in a cold, distant way, like a statue made of living starlight. It wore robes that seemed to be made of liquid metal and carried itself with the confidence of someone who had never known defeat. When it spoke, its voice was heard in every language on Earth at the same time. The alien said its name was High Consul Veltar of the Galactic Dominion. It spoke with the tone of someone talking to children or pets. The words were polite, but the meaning was clear. Humanity was nothing more than insects to be collected. The consul explained that Earth had been chosen for something called integration. The aliens had been watching humans for a long time and had decided that the planet had useful resources. The people would be relocated to work colonies on distant worlds while Earth was strip mined for its metals and other materials. The alien presented this as a generous offer. He said that humans were lucky to be chosen for such an honor. Most species were simply destroyed when the Dominion found them, but humans showed potential as workers, so they would be allowed to live as slaves. The consul gave Earth exactly 72 hours to surrender. The choice was simple: submit peacefully and become workers in the Galactic Empire, or be destroyed and have the planet taken anyway. The alien made it clear that resistance was not an option. When the message ended, the holograms faded away and the ships returned to their silent waiting. But something had changed. The aliens had made a mistake. They had shown humanity exactly what they were facing and given them time to think about. Ethan Wu stood in the street looking up at the golden ship above Seoul. He felt angry more than afraid. The alien had talked to humans like they were stupid animals that should be grateful for slavery. That was not how you talked to people. That was how you made enemies all around the world. Humans were having the same reaction. The aliens expected fear and quick submission. Instead, they found something much more dangerous. They found humans who were insulted and angry and had nothing left to lose. The consul had given Earth 72 hours to decide, but he had also given humanity something precious: time to think, time to plan, and time to remember that humans had never been very good at following orders, especially from bullies. The golden ships hung silent in the sky, waiting for humanity's answer, but down below something was stirring, something the aliens had not expected and were not prepared for. Humanity was getting ready to fight. The emergency meeting in the United Nations building lasted 2 full days. President Tae-young sat at the head of the table, surrounded by leaders from every nation on Earth. The room was filled with tension as everyone tried to figure out what to do about the alien ultimatum. Hyun Woo worked as a translator between the different world leaders. He had never seen anything like this before. Countries that had been enemies for decades were suddenly working together. The alien threat had done something that years of diplomacy could not accomplish. It had united humanity against a common enemy. The first day of meetings was chaos. Everyone had different ideas about how to respond. Some leaders wanted to surrender immediately. They argued that fighting advanced aliens was suicide. Others wanted to fight no matter what the cost. They said that slavery was worse than death. Dr. Yoonji was called to the meeting to explain what she had learned about the alien technology. She stood before the world leaders and told them the truth. The alien ships were incredibly advanced, but they were also old. The technology had not been updated in a very long time. She explained that the aliens seemed to have stopped innovating centuries ago. They used the same basic designs for everything and relied on their reputation more than actual superiority. The ships were powerful, but they were also predictable. Captain Minho presented the military situation to the leaders. He was honest about their chances in a direct fight. Earth's weapons would barely scratch the alien ships, but he also pointed out that the aliens had made mistakes. They had given humanity time to prepare and had revealed their arrogance. The most surprising thing was how quickly ordinary people around the world began to react. Ji-won, the young reporter, walked through the streets of Seoul and found something amazing. Instead of panic, she found anger. People were not afraid of the aliens, they were insulted by them. The alien consul had made a critical error in his message. He had talked down to humans like they were stupid children. This had triggered something deep in human nature that the aliens did not understand. Humans did not like being told what to do, especially by bullies in factories around the world. Workers like Dong Haiyan organized their colleagues to keep producing even with alien ships blocking out the sun. They knew that if humanity was going to fight, they would need supplies and equipment. The global economy began to transform. Overnight schools stayed open and teachers kept teaching. Children asked questions about the aliens and their teachers gave honest answers. The next generation needed to understand what was happening, even if the world was about to change forever. Religious leaders of all faiths came together to provide comfort and guidance to their people. They reminded everyone that humans had faced impossible odds before and had always found a way to survive. Faith became another weapon in humanity's arsenal. The second day of meetings was different. The world leaders had stopped arguing about whether to fight and started planning how to fight. They divided responsibilities and resources in ways that would have been impossible before the alien arrival. President Taeyong made the final decision. He would give the response that all of humanity had agreed upon. It would be simple, direct, and unmistakably human. The aliens wanted a ceremony of surrender, but they would get something else entirely. Dr. Yunji continued her research while the leaders debated. She had found something interesting about the alien communication system. It worked both ways. The aliens could understand human responses perfectly. There would be no confusion about what Earth's answer meant. The alien consul waited aboard his flagship, expecting humanity to follow the same pattern as every other species he had conquered. First would come desperate negotiations, then gradual acceptance, and finally complete submission. It had worked the same way for 3,000 years, but Captain Minho had been studying the aliens' previous conquests through interceptor communications. Every species the Dominion had defeated had been scared into submission before the first battle was fought. Fear was the aliens' greatest weapon. The consul's advisors were already planning the relocation of Earth's population. They had done this so many times before that it had become routine. They expected the humans to be grateful for being allowed to live as slaves. On the final day, President Taeyong stood before the cameras of the world. The alien consul had demanded a formal response, and he would get one. The president walked to the podium with a simple piece of paper in his hand. The alien ships monitored every transmission from Earth. They were prepared to record humanity's surrender and broadcast it to the rest of the galaxy as another example of the Dominion's power. Instead, they would witness something unprecedented. The president looked directly into the camera, knowing that the aliens were watching every word. He held up the paper with Earth's official response written in large, clear letters. The word was simple, but it carried the weight of all human history. Yin Wu translated the response into multiple languages so there could be no misunderstanding. Dr. Yunji watched from her laboratory as the message was broadcast. Captain Minho stood ready with his forces, knowing that the real fight was about to begin. The word that President Taeyong spoke was one that humans had been saying for thousands of years. It was a word that parents heard from their children, that soldiers shouted at their enemies, and that every free person had the right to say. The response was broadcast to every alien ship in the fleet and beyond. The consul and his advisors watched in stunned silence as the leader of this primitive species delivered Earth's answer to their generous offer of slavery. The word echoed across the galaxy, carried by the aliens' own communication networks. For the first time in 3,000 years, a species had looked at the mighty Galactic Dominion and given them a response they were not prepared for. President Taeyong's voice was calm and steady as he spoke that single word to the cosmos. He spoke for every human who had ever lived and every human who would ever be born. He spoke for the idea that freedom was not something that could be taken away by force. The word was no. The response was so simple that it caught the aliens completely off guard. They had expected begging or negotiation or at least some kind of explanation. Instead, they got a single word that needed no explanation at all. Ji-won watched the broadcast from the streets of Seoul and saw something beautiful happening around her. People were not running or hiding. They were standing tall and proud. Their leader had spoken for all of them, and they approved of his message. The alien consul stood frozen in his command chamber as the implications of Earth's response sank in. No species had ever simply refused the Dominion's offer before. There were protocols for rebellion and protocols for negotiation, but no protocol for a simple no. Dr. Yunji smiled as she watched the alien ships try to process what had just happened. Their computer systems had no response programmed for this situation. They had conquered the galaxy by making other species afraid, but humans were not afraid, Captain. Minho gave orders to his forces around the world. Earth had just declared war on the most powerful empire in the galaxy using the shortest declaration of war in history. One word had changed everything, and there was no going back. The consul tried to understand what had just happened, but his 3,000-year-old empire had no experience with this kind of defiance. Earth had just shown the galaxy that the Dominion could be resisted and that would change everything. Dong Haiyan and workers like him around the world heard the president's response and went back to their jobs with new determination. They had work to do and a war to win. Their leader had spoken, and now it was time to back up his words with action. The single word, no, spread across the galaxy faster than the Dominion could stop it. On 1,000 enslaved worlds, creatures who had forgotten what freedom meant heard about the small blue planet that had refused to surrender. Earth's response was so unexpected that it broke the aliens' entire system of conquest. They had built their empire on fear and submission, but humans had just shown them something they had never encountered before. Simple, stubborn defiance. The consul realized that he was no longer dealing with a normal conquest. This was something new and dangerous. Earth had not just rejected the Dominion's offer, they had challenged the very foundation of the galactic empire. The word no became humanity's first gift to the galaxy, a reminder that freedom was always a choice and that sometimes the most powerful response was the simplest one of all. High Consul Veltar stood in his command chamber aboard the flagship, staring at the communication screen that had just delivered Earth's response. His crystalline advisors whispered among themselves in the strange musical language of their species. None of them had ever experienced anything like this before. For 3,000 years, the Galactic Dominion had followed the same pattern when conquering new worlds. First came the demonstration of power, then the generous offer of surrender, and finally the inevitable submission. Every species in the galaxy had followed this pattern without exception. Subconsul Morgoth approached the consul with obvious confusion in his glowing eyes. Perhaps the translation systems malfunctioned, he suggested. Hopefully, surely these primitive creatures cannot mean to refuse our benevolent protection. The consul activated the translation logs and reviewed them carefully. The word no had been translated correctly into every language in the Dominion database. There was no confusion about what the humans meant. Their response was clear and unmistakable. Dr. Yunji sat in her laboratory on Earth, reviewing the same translation data from the other side. She had discovered something interesting about the alien communication system. During the 3 days of silence, the translators worked both ways perfectly. The aliens understood human responses just as well as humans understood theirs. The consul tried to make sense of what had happened. He reviewed the files on every species the Dominion had ever conquered, looking for any similar response, but the records showed the same pattern every time. Fear, negotiation, and finally submission. No species had ever simply said no before. Captain Minho watched the alien ships from his command center and noticed something important. The ships had not moved or changed position since receiving Earth's response. They seemed to be waiting for something, but he could not figure out what the consul decided to try again. Perhaps the humans had not understood the seriousness of their situation. He would make the consequences of refusal more clear. This time his message would be more direct and threatening. The holographic message appeared above every major city on Earth. Once again, the consul's crystalline form shimmered with barely controlled anger. His voice carried a tone of authority that had made entire civilizations tremble. Your response is unexpected, the consul said, his words echoing across the planet. Perhaps you do not understand the consequences of refusing the Dominion's generous offer. We possess weapons that could destroy your entire world with a single command. The message continued with detailed descriptions of the alien weapons. and their capabilities. The consul explained how previous civilizations had been destroyed for refusing to submit. He showed images of dead worlds and empty space where star systems used to be. President Tae-young watched the message from his office. In Seoul, surrounded by his advisors, the alien consul was trying to frighten humanity into changing their response. But the president had expected this. The aliens were showing their true nature. Now Yunji analyzed the new message carefully and made another important discovery. The consul's threats revealed information about the alien technology that she had been trying to understand. The weapons were powerful, but they were also limited in ways the aliens did not realize. The consul's advisors began to show signs of panic as reports came in from around the galaxy. News of Earth's refusal was spreading faster than they could suppress it. Other enslaved species were beginning to ask questions that had not been asked for Century SG-1. The young reporter walked through the streets of Seoul, interviewing people about the aliens' latest message. She found something remarkable. Instead of being more afraid, people seemed to be getting angrier. The threatening tone had made them more determined to resist. Captain Minho coordinated with military leaders around the world to prepare for what was coming. The aliens had revealed their intentions clearly. Now there would be no more negotiations, only war. Everyone knew that Earth's military was no match for alien technology, but they also knew they had no choice. The consul made a crucial decision that would change everything. Instead of simply destroying Earth as an example, he decided to demonstrate the Dominion's power slowly. He would break human will, gradually showing them that resistance was hopeless. This gave humanity something the aliens had not intended to give: time to prepare, adapt, and find weaknesses in the alien technology the consul's arrogance had created. An opportunity that humans were quick to recognize. Engineer Sumin worked in her laboratory studying fragments of alien technology that had somehow fallen to Earth during the ship's arrival. She discovered that the aliens had become so dependent on their advanced systems that they had forgotten how to innovate. The consul's second message had an effect that he did not expect. Instead of frightening humans into submission, it had given them valuable information about their enemies. Dr. Yunji's team began to understand how the alien weapons worked and, more importantly, how they might be stopped. High-end organized workers in factories around the world to begin producing equipment that might be useful against the aliens. They could not match alien technology, but they could adapt human technology in ways the aliens would not expect. Consul received reports from his sub-commanders that the human response had been broadcast to other worlds in the galaxy. Species that had been enslaved for centuries were beginning to remember what freedom felt like. The simple word "no" was becoming a symbol of resistance. President Tae-young prepared his second response to the alien consul. He would not be intimidated by threats or demonstrations of power. The aliens had shown their true nature, and humanity would show theirs in return. The consul's advisors suggested that perhaps they should request reinforcements from the Dominion core worlds. This conquest was not proceeding according to plan, and they needed more ships to deal with the unexpected resistance. But the consul's pride would not allow him to admit that a primitive species was causing problems. He had conquered hundreds of worlds and would not be defeated by creatures who had barely learned to travel between planets. Dr. Yunji made another breakthrough in understanding the alien technology. The energy shields that protected their ships had a specific frequency that could be disrupted with the right equipment. Human technology was primitive, but it was also flexible in ways that alien technology was not. The consul decided to make an example of Earth. By destroying a small target first, he would show the humans what happened to those who defied the Dominion. Then they would surely reconsider their foolish refusal. Captain Minho detected the alien preparations for an attack and warned all military units around the world. The first battle was about to begin, and everyone knew that Earth's survival depended on their ability to adapt and improvise. The consul selected a small uninhabited island in the Pacific Ocean as his target. He would vaporize it completely, showing the humans that their defiance was meaningless against the power of the Dominion. But Dr. Yunji's team had been busy during the days since Earth's refusal. They had secretly deployed a network of modified communication towers around the world, equipment that could potentially disrupt alien energy systems. Engineer Sumin had discovered that the aliens communicated through quantum entanglement networks that connected all their ships. These networks could be accessed if someone knew the right frequencies and had the right equipment. The consul gave the order to fire on the uninhabited island, confident that this demonstration would finally break human resistance. The weapon charged with energy that could destroy entire cities and prepared to show Earth the price of defiance, but when the alien weapon fired, something unexpected happened. The energy beam was redirected by the network of towers that Dr. Yunji had deployed. The weapon struck empty ocean instead of the target island for the first time in 3,000 years. An alien weapon had failed to hit its intended target. The consul stared in disbelief as his perfect technology was defeated by primitive human equipment. The failure of the weapon was broadcast around the world and beyond. Humanity had not just refused to surrender, they had actually defended themselves against alien technology. The impossible had happened. The consul realized that he was no longer fighting primitive creatures. He was facing something the Dominion had never encountered before, a species that refused to be conquered and had the creativity to back up their refusal. Reports came in from around the galaxy that rebellions were starting on other worlds. The news of Earth's successful defense had spread, and other species were beginning to believe that the Dominion could be defeated. Consul's perfect conquest had become a disaster, and he knew that his superiors would not be pleased. Earth had done more than just say no. They had shown the galaxy that the mighty Dominion could be resisted. The simple word no had become something much more powerful. It had become proof that freedom was possible even against impossible odds. And that was the most dangerous thing the Dominion had ever faced. The final confrontation came not through weapons or massive space battles, but through a simple meeting between two very different species. High Consul Veltar stood in the ruins of his empire and requested one last chance to speak with Earth's leaders. The consul was desperate to salvage something from his complete failure. His superiors were dead or imprisoned, his fleet was powerless, and rebellions were spreading across every world the Dominion had once controlled. President Taeyang agreed to meet with the consul, but only on humanity's terms. The alien leader would have to come to Earth and face the species he had tried to enslave. The consul had no choice but to accept. The meeting was held at the United Nations building in New York, the same place where humanity had first said no to the Dominion's demands. The consul's shuttle landed outside the building under the watchful eyes of human guards. Dr. Yunji sat in the gallery watching the proceedings. She had spent months studying alien technology and had come to understand something important about their species. The Dominion's power had always been based on fear rather than actual superiority. The consul entered the assembly hall looking very different from the confident being who had first demanded Earth's surrender. His crystalline skin was dull and cracked, his robes were torn, and his glowing eyes had lost their inner light. "You have caused considerable trouble," the consul said, his voice carrying barely controlled anger. "My empire is in ruins, my fleet is powerless, and the galaxy is in chaos, all because you refused a generous offer, Ambassador." Haiyan Wu translated the consul's words for the world leaders present, but everyone could hear the defeat in the alien's voice. The mighty representative of galactic civilization sounded like a broken old man. President Taeyang stood to respond, and his words were broadcast to every world in the galaxy. "You still don't understand, do you? You came here expecting to find a primitive species that would bow before superior technology. Instead, you found humans." The president continued, speaking in the calm, steady voice that had become famous throughout the galaxy. "We don't submit because we're told to. We don't surrender because someone has bigger weapons. We fight because fighting is what we do." Captain Minho watched from the military section as the consul's advisors whispered urgently among themselves. Reports were still coming in from across the galaxy. The rebellion was spreading faster than anyone had imagined. The consul tried one last desperate argument. "Your resistance has doomed the galaxy to chaos. Without the Dominion's guidance, countless species will destroy themselves in wars and conflicts. You have unleashed disaster, Doctor." Yunji smiled as she listened to the consul's words. She had been monitoring communications from the liberated worlds and had found something wonderful. Most species were choosing peace and cooperation over war and conquest. Engineer Su Min had been working to help restore basic systems to the disabled alien ship. She had discovered that many of the alien crews were grateful to be free from their empire's tyranny. They wanted to go home and rebuild Their worlds the consul's own advisors began to abandon him as more reports came in. The Dominion's core worlds were forming democratic governments with the help of liberated species. The age of galactic tyranny was truly ending. President Tae-young delivered the final blow to the consul's arguments. Your empire was built on the lie that freedom is impossible and that some species are meant to rule others. We proved that lie wrong with a single word. The consul looked around the room at the human faces staring back at him. There was no fear in their eyes, no desperation, just calm determination. These creatures had turned. While the alien consul and his advisors tried to understand what had gone wrong with their weapon, humanity got to work. Dr. Yoonji gathered her research team in laboratories around the world. They had successfully deflected one alien attack, but they knew more would come. The failure of the alien weapon had given humanity something precious, proof that the invaders were not invincible. Dr. Yoonji's team began to reverse engineer every piece of alien technology they could find, not to copy it but to understand how to defeat it. Factory worker Dong Hyan led a global effort to transform human industry overnight. Car factories stopped making vehicles and started producing weapons components. Electronics manufacturers shifted their production lines to build communication devices that could penetrate alien interference. The transformation was remarkable. Within days, the entire global economy had become a war machine. Every factory, every workshop, every laboratory was focused on one goal: preparing humanity for the fight of their lives. Captain Minho coordinated with military leaders worldwide to develop new tactics. Since conventional weapons were useless against the alien ships, they would need to be creative. Humanity's greatest strength had always been their ability to adapt and innovate. Young reporter Ji-won discovered something important. While investigating the aliens' previous conquests, she found records that showed every species the Dominion had conquered had been intimidated by their technological superiority. None had ever tried to understand and counter the alien systems. The aliens had grown lazy over 3 millennia of easy victories. They used the same weapons, the same tactics, and the same threats against every species they encountered. They had never faced an enemy that studied their weaknesses. Dr. Yoonji made a crucial discovery about the alien energy shields. The shields worked by creating a field that deflected physical attacks, but the field had gaps at specific frequencies. If they could generate the right electromagnetic pulse, they could disrupt the shields temporarily. Engineer Sumin worked day and night on a project that could change everything. She had found a way to hack into the alien quantum communication networks, not to steal information but to send messages of their own. The consul decided to escalate his demonstration of power. He would target a major city, this time to show humanity the price of continued resistance. But his own arrogance worked against him. The more he threatened, the more determined humans became. President Tae-young addressed the world once again. His message was broadcast to every human on Earth and beyond. "We know what we're facing," he said calmly. "We know the odds against us, but we also know who we are. We are human and we do not surrender." The president's words were translated into every language on Earth and broadcast to the stars themselves. Other species throughout the galaxy heard the message and began to remember what courage sounded like. Dr. Yoonji's team completed their first major breakthrough. They had created a weapon that could disrupt alien energy shields for short periods. It was not enough to destroy the massive ships, but it was enough to hurt them. Captain Minho led the first human attack on an alien vessel using the new weapon. The target was one of the smaller scout ships that had separated from the main fleet. The attack was coordinated with military units around the world. The weapon fired a concentrated electromagnetic pulse at the alien ship, and for a few seconds, the golden shields flickered and failed. Human missiles struck the ship's hull, causing visible damage. It was the first time in 3,000 years that alien technology had been harmed by primitive weapons. The consul watched in growing alarm as reports came in from around the globe. Humans were attacking his ships with modified civilian technology. They had turned passenger aircraft into guided missiles and used industrial lasers as weapons. Every piece of human technology was being adapted for war. Satellite networks became targeting systems, manufacturing equipment became weapons production lines, even children's toys were being modified to carry explosives. The consul's advisors brought him disturbing news from across the galaxy. Other species were beginning to rebel, inspired by Earth's example. Worlds that had been enslaved for centuries were rising up against their dominion overlords. The Council realized that Earth had become something far more dangerous than a single rebellious world. It had become a symbol of hope for every oppressed species in the galaxy. The simple word "no" had become a rallying cry for freedom. Engineer Su-min completed her most ambitious project yet. She had found a way to turn the aliens' own quantum communication network against them. With one transmission, she could send a message to every enslaved world in the galaxy. The message was simple but powerful. If humans could resist the Dominion, so could everyone else. The network that the aliens used to coordinate their empire had become the tool of its destruction. Dr. Yunji made another breakthrough in understanding alien technology. The power source for their weapons was incredibly advanced, but it had a critical flaw. The energy was unstable when exposed to specific electromagnetic frequencies. Captain Minho coordinated attacks on alien ships around the world. Using this new information, human forces struck at the alien fleet with everything they had. The attacks were not enough to destroy the ships, but they were enough to damage them. For the first time since the Golden Fleet had arrived, the alien ships began to show signs of wear. Battle damage scarred their perfect hulls, and their movements became less precise. The invincible aliens were starting to look vulnerable. The Council demanded reinforcements from the Dominion core worlds, but his superiors were dealing with rebellions on dozens of other planets. Earth's example had sparked the largest uprising in galactic history. President Tae-young broadcast another message to the galaxy. This time he spoke directly to the enslaved species on other worlds. "We cannot free you," he said, "but we can show you that freedom is possible. The choice is yours to make." The message was carried by the aliens' own communication network to every corner of the galaxy. Species that had forgotten what freedom meant began to remember. Rebellions broke out on worlds that had been peaceful for centuries. Dong Hyan and workers like him around the world increased their production of improvised weapons. Human creativity was being applied to warfare in ways the aliens had never imagined. Every day brought new innovations and new ways to fight. The Council's perfect conquest had become a nightmare of resistance and rebellion. What should have been a simple demonstration of power had become a galactic war. The humans had turned his moment of triumph into his greatest defeat. Dr. Yunji's team developed new weapons every day. They learned to disrupt alien shields, to interfere with their communications, and to predict their movements. Human technology was primitive, but it was also unpredictable. Council made a desperate decision. He would use the Dominion's most powerful weapon to destroy Earth completely. Better to lose the planet than to let it continue inspiring rebellion across the galaxy. But Engineer Su-min had one more surprise for the aliens. She had programmed a virus into their quantum network that would activate if they tried to destroy Earth. The virus would broadcast Earth's final message to every species in the galaxy. Captain Minho prepared for the final battle, knowing that humanity might not survive it. But he also knew that they had already won something more important than survival. They had shown the galaxy that the Dominion could be defeated. The Council charged his most powerful weapon and prepared to end the human rebellion once and for all. But he had underestimated humanity's greatest weapon, their refusal to give up even when facing certain death. Dr. Yunji watched the alien preparations from her laboratory and smiled grimly. Humanity had always been at its best when faced with impossible odds. They had turned their defiance into a weapon that could destroy empires. The golden ships prepared for their final attack on Earth, but they faced an enemy unlike any they had encountered before. Humans who refused to surrender even when surrender meant survival. Council was about to learn that some victories cost more than defeats, and that the word "no" could be more powerful than any weapon in the galaxy. The battle for Earth was about to begin, but the war for freedom had already been won. News of Earth's resistance spread throughout the galaxy faster than the Dominion could suppress it. For the first time in 3,000 years, a species had said no to the Galactic Empire and made it stick on 1,000 worlds' enslaved populations. Whispered about the small blue planet that had stood up to the mighty Dominion, the Council found himself trapped in an impossible situation. He could not admit failure to his superiors without destroying his career, but he also could not defeat Earth With his current resources, what should have been a simple conquest had become a prolonged war. Yunji's team made another breakthrough in understanding alien technology. They discovered that the energy source powering the alien ships was incredibly advanced but also unstable. The aliens had built their empire on technology they no longer fully understood. The discovery came when engineer Su Min was analyzing fragments of alien hull material that had been damaged in the recent attacks. The metal contained traces of an energy signature that human science had never seen. Before Ambassador Haiyan Wu worked with world leaders to coordinate a global response to the alien threat. Every nation contributed resources from the smallest island countries to the largest superpowers. Humanity had never been so united, and it showed the unity was remarkable. Countries that had been enemies for decades suddenly shared technology and resources freely. The alien threat had created something beautiful. A single human family working together for survival. Captain Minho led increasingly successful attacks on alien vessels using the new weapons developed by Dr. Yunji's team. They could not destroy the massive ships, but they could hurt them badly. Enough to make the aliens think twice about their tactics. The attacks were coordinated around the world with military units striking at the same time in different locations. The aliens found themselves fighting a global war against an enemy that seemed to be everywhere at once. The consul received reports that made his crystalline skin turn pale with fear. Similar uprisings were breaking out across the galaxy. Species that had been enslaved for centuries were beginning to remember what freedom felt like on the planet Kepler 442b. A species called the Velnari had been mining rare crystals for the Dominion for 800 years. When they heard about Earth's resistance, they stopped working and demanded their freedom. The rebellion on Kepler 442b inspired others. Within days, 12 more worlds had declared independence from the Dominion. The consul's superiors were no longer interested in his problems on Earth. They had a galaxy-wide rebellion to deal with. Dar Yunji made her most important discovery yet. The aliens' technology was powered by controlled quantum reactions that could be disrupted by specific electromagnetic frequencies. If they could generate a powerful enough signal, they could shut down entire alien fleets. The discovery came at a perfect time because the consul had decided to call in reinforcements. A massive Dominion war fleet was approaching Earth with enough firepower to destroy the planet several times over. President Taeyang addressed the world once more. As the alien reinforcements approached, "We have shown the galaxy that the Dominion can be resisted," he said calmly. "Now we must show them that it can be defeated." The president's words were broadcast to every world in the galaxy, including the approaching alien fleet. The message was simple but powerful. Humanity would not surrender no matter how many ships the aliens brought. Engineer Su Min completed her most ambitious project, yet she had found a way to turn the aliens' own quantum communication network into a weapon. With the right signal, she could overload their entire fleet at once. The quantum network connected every alien ship in the galaxy, allowing them to communicate instantly across vast distances. But the same network could be used to send a virus that would shut down their technology. The young reporter discovered something important while investigating the Dominion's history. The alien empire had never faced a coordinated rebellion before. Their tactics were designed to fight individual worlds, not a galaxy-wide uprising. The consul made a desperate decision. He would use the approaching war fleet to destroy Earth completely. Even if it meant losing the planet's resources, it would send a message to other rebellious worlds. But Captain Minho had prepared for this possibility. Human forces around the world were ready to implement Dr. Yunji's final plan. They would turn the aliens' greatest strength into their greatest weakness. The alien war fleet arrived at Earth with 500 ships, each one capable of destroying continents. The consul felt confident that this overwhelming force would finally break human resistance. But humanity had one more surprise for the aliens. Engineer Su Min activated her quantum virus just as the war fleet entered Earth's solar system. The virus spread through the alien network faster than light itself. The effect was immediate and devastating. Every alien ship in the system suddenly lost power. Their weapons went offline, their shields failed, and their engines shut down. The mighty war fleet became helpless metal hulks drifting in space. The consul watched in horror as his reinforcements were neutralized by a virus created by the primitive species. He had come to conquer. The humans had turned the Dominion's own technology against them. Reports came in from across the galaxy that the virus had spread to other Dominion fleets. Hundreds of alien ships were drifting powerless in space while their enslaved crews tried to restart their systems. Dr. Yunji's team had created something unprecedented in galactic history. They had found a way to defeat advanced alien technology using human creativity and determination. The impossible had become possible. The consul realized that his empire was collapsing around him. The virus had spread to the Dominion core worlds, where the Emperor himself was trapped aboard a powerless flagship. The 3,000-year-old empire was dying. President Taeyong broadcast a message to the galaxy offering help to any species that wanted to rebuild their worlds without Dominion control. The offer was accepted by hundreds of worlds within hours. The consul's advisors abandoned him as reports came in that the Emperor had been overthrown by his own people. The Dominion was finished, and everyone knew it. The age of galactic tyranny was ending. Captain Minho coordinated rescue operations to help the powerless alien ships. Their crews were stranded in space, and humanity chose to save them rather than let them die. It was a gesture that surprised the galaxy. The rescue operations showed something important about human nature. Even in victory, humans chose mercy over revenge. The species that had refused to surrender also refused to become conquerors. Engineer Sumin worked to restore power to the alien ships, but only enough to let them return to their homeworlds. The humans had won the war, but they did not want to rule the galaxy. The consul stood alone on his bridge, watching human ships approach to offer assistance. He had come to conquer Earth, and instead had witnessed the birth of a new galactic order based on freedom rather than fear. Dr. Yunji's virus had done more than disable alien technology. It had broken the psychological hold that the Dominion had maintained over the galaxy for 3 millennia. The Empire of Fear was finished. The consul's final report to his dead empire was simple. Earth had said no, and meant it. The humans had kept their word, and the galaxy was free because of it. The golden ships that had once seemed so terrifying now drifted helplessly in space, while human vessels moved among them offering aid and assistance. The conquerors had become the conquered. The consul realized that he was witnessing something unprecedented in galactic history. The birth of a new age where freedom was possible and tyranny could be defeated by those brave enough to say no. The word that President Taeyong had spoken months earlier had become the foundation of a new galactic civilization, one where every species had the right to choose their own destiny. The consul's invasion of Earth had failed completely, but it had succeeded in ways he never intended. It had shown the galaxy that freedom was possible and that empires built on fear could fall. The humans had won more than a war. They had won the right to reshape the galaxy according to their values of freedom, dignity, and the simple but powerful belief that no meant no.